Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Garces Donay, owner of Garces Law Firm. Welcome back to Pink Miglio Confessions. Today, we are talking about an interesting topic that is a little bit sad, but I think it's really relevant to talk about. So I'm hoping that you can join me today on some of the things I'm going to be discussing. Today's episode is called What to Do After a Loved One Passes. And yes, we never want to think about these things because it can be rather sad. But when we think about this, learning and being present at the time of a loved one's death is really, really a difficult moment. Many times, ones that we don't want to look back on because obviously it brings on a lot of pain and memories. And so, thoughts and feelings of grief can be quite overwhelming. And so, we get that. And this week in Pink Miglio Confessions, we're talking a lot about the fact that there could be a kind of a list of things you can think about doing, or maybe even contacting the right individuals to help you with some of this. So I just want to make sure all our viewers know a little bit about that. But like I said, really quick for those of you that have not seen this before, I'm Stephanie Garces Donay, owner of Garces Law Firm in Palatine, Illinois, where we help individuals, couples, families to prepare for the unexpected, especially in the event of losing somebody. But we also create happy things like legacy plans and securing financial future. So just a couple of things that we do here. And like I said, today's topic is something that we don't want to talk about. So what happens when someone passes away? And to be honest, on almost a daily basis, I personally work through the legal process of planning for these challenging moments, especially with clients, especially when it's something that is not anticipated. Other times, unfortunately, there are things that do happen that are anticipated. So that's one of the things I like to plan for, but there's always planning that can be done either way. Another thing is, I wanted to go through a little bit of a checklist today of some of the things that we can actually discuss together as to what can we actually do in the event that someone passes away, especially when it comes to responsibilities and maybe tasks of the designated legal representative or someone in your family that would probably take on this task. And so some of the things we're going to address are that of some of the things you should be doing when the time comes, if the time comes, unfortunately, for you and your family. And so estate planning is really comes with like a checklist when someone passes away that we usually go through with clients. And in today's episode, I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we discuss when this happens. Now, one of the best ways, really, to talk about this is to talk openly about some of the things that you would want in your estate plan with an attorney, with loved ones, but certainly putting in writing is a good way to prepare. But let's just say we're beyond that. So one of the best ways to give back to your family is to basically prepare for the future. And this can also be when you can make your own decisions. It doesn't have to always be you've passed away. A lot of times unexpected accidents happen or someone loses capacity. And this is also true for our aging parents as we get older. Or if you're watching this, if you're an aging parent yourself, you know very well that it's very possible that we've thought about this. What happens if something happens to me? And with partners and spouses, we also worry about their well-being. So people don't like to think about when someone passes away, but being prepared and having a plan and really making sure that everything is in place as the way you would want it is really, really a good way to have control. And so you can really eliminate a lot of headaches, legal issues, and really, I guess you could say bad blood between everybody if you actually leave something behind that stipulates to some of the things that you want. Also, you can avoid probate. I know we talk about probate a lot, and if you look it up, it's expensive, it's timely, and it's definitely avoidable. So just so you know, it's something you can definitely avoid. So when we talk about checklists, what are some of the things that you could be doing if a loved one passes? Well, of course, I always start with you should grieve, right? That's common sense. But sometimes we get so wrapped up in all the things we have to do that we forget to grieve. So I always tell my clients when they call me immediately after someone has passed or something like that, please take the time to grieve. That is number one. But Let's say that you are in the process of grieving and you actually are looking for next steps. So some of the immediate affairs are you want to contact family, friends, and loved ones. Obviously, communicating what has happened is important, but nothing else matters but just being there for each other, which really helps with the grieving process, but also helps everyone be informed as to what happened and in what manner. So arranging for childcare and pets is also something. I know pets are some of people's kids. I know they're mine. So, if you guys are thinking about that, think about alternative arrangements for care, especially if there's a lot to do in the first couple of days, especially when it comes to having to leave the state, or perhaps you have to do something else where you aren't going to be around and can't care for your kids or your pets. You can't bring them with you, perhaps, of where you're going. Asking someone to watch them is not a bad idea, and ensuring proper childcare and pet sitting arrangements are in place is a good place to start. Also, the most logical thing, and I'm always going to tell my clients do, is to locate the paperwork, right? Now, nobody wants to think about, oh my gosh, am I really thinking about this at this time? Well, yes, eventually you will have to locate the will, the trust, especially when someone passes away, because there are going to be questions that arise as to what are the things that they left behind and to whom. So, getting the documents in order, making sure you can get copies. A lot of times, there are business cards inside of some of the estate planning documents that, or even like the contact information of the attorney that drafted it, that usually is in there, and you can always contact their office if you needed a copy. So that might be a possibility. But obviously, the wills and the trusts are usually something that come into play when someone has passed. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if someone hasn't passed? What if someone is actually lacking capacity for purposes of lacking capacity? Like they're still alive, but they can't make their own decisions. Maybe they've had an accident that would render them unable to make decisions for themselves. And so you'll want to get the powers of attorney letters, locate those. Powers of attorney letters are really important because it actually explains who has powers to make decisions, whether it's healthcare and financial decisions for the person that has lost capacity. And so those are documents that would want to be available, and you want to find if you're looking for them because a person has become incapacitated, not necessarily passed away, but definitely incapacitated. So usually the regular powers of attorney documents should be available. You should try to locate those. Also, make sure that you know where the original is. I mean, a lot of times people will say, well, what happens if the house burns down and all the papers go missing? Well, you certainly don't want to get rid of the originals. I mean, the reality is that notarized copies and documents that are original with the signatures and everything are usually the ones that you need when push comes to shove. And so you certainly don't want to go off copies. If you can get the originals, that is the way to go. Also, please note, if you're watching this, if you have printed documents from online services that are defective or something like that, it's an issue sometimes when it comes to needing the documents. So this is where I see a lot of my clients kind of get into trouble a lot of times if they've been previous clients of ours, whether it's in the estate planning world or other matters that we handle, and they've used documents that they've created online, because there's plenty of online resources that'll say you can do fill out this form and we'll generate a will or a power of attorney for you. Sometimes they get into trouble because they didn't create this with a licensed attorney that knows the laws of the state and stuff like that. Just something to keep in mind. Now, keep in mind too, those documents sometimes are notarized, and that's very important depending on where you live. Notarizing documents are like, I don't know, it's like the glue to a lot of this. And so those are super important as well. Other issues occur that can come up, of course, but probate costs is where you end up having to kind of say incur more costs in the event that you have to open up a probate. And that's something you can avoid. Opening up a probate as a general matter is great because that is usually done by getting an estate plan in order ahead of time. And probate costs just continue to skyrocket. I think, like everything that's going on right now, everything decides to skyrocket, including court costs and whatnot. So if you don't have protections for your things right now regarding, your assets, your accounts, maybe you have more than one home, maybe you have acquired things in inheritance recently. Those are things that you should formalize in legal documents to make sure they're protected, and the proper assignment of those items and who they go to are discussed in writing. And so those are some of the responsibilities that come up once there is a located will and a trust, because those documents usually name a trustee or a successor. This is someone that steps into the shoes of the person that has passed or is incapacitated. And so make sure to consider doing this in advance. But again, locating those documents are basically another step with that. Another step you want to consider is you want to confirm and oversee the transfer of the person's body to a funeral home, if that's what they want, or perhaps they're going to be cremated. These are really hard decisions, right? These decisions are not easy. They're not ones that are supposed to be fast. I mean, a lot of times, depending on the state you reside in, there are actually some regulations and rules with regards to how do you transport somebody's body and stuff like that. So there's a lot of rules with that. And one of the benefits of having an estate plan is you can actually even name the place that you would want to be buried at, and the funeral home if you want to do that in advance. There's plenty of individuals that have a plan for that. And I know you're probably watching this and saying, wow, that's really sad to talk about. But I always say if you create a plan, you actually have more control, and you're giving a gift to your family, because your family's not going to really know always what you wanted, even though you may think they do. So a benefit of selecting a funeral home in advance is that the staff and the hospice professionals usually help arrange transportation so that you don't have to do that, which is really common. Another thing on your checklist you may consider is obtaining the certificate of death. That is basically where the medical, or the coroner, I should say, the coroner is the person that has basically said why this person has deceased. And so those are important because that is one of the documents that you'll need time and time again to get access to things, but also to even like the funeral home and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that happen after someone passes where you actually need the death certificate. And so obviously the medical care facilities, or whoever is doing the autopsy, I should say, if there is one, would usually have this. If the death occurred in the home, usually there's on-site officers as well to help with that process. But usually this is taken care of. You don't have to worry about, where to get it. Usually it's part of the process, obviously, for those of you that are wondering. But yeah, usually that's kind of automated. And actually the death certificate kind of goes along with the details, right? So of what happened, and it talks about it says like the name of the person and these other things. So again, nothing that everyone wants to think about, but it's definitely something that's important to have. Also, the funeral homes, speaking of them, have a lot of experience with helping plan for the issuance of a death certificate in case you're having trouble with it. They can also ensure that you have enough original copies so that you can make your arrangements and do the various tasks that you need to do that include financial matters that are being taken care of from the individual, or even reporting to the Social Security office. Filing taxes, I know, is a big one. There's a lot of appropriate paperwork that needs to be filled out and stuff like that when someone has passed. So there is a lot that comes from it. Another thing too, if you choose to do this, you don't necessarily have to, but sometimes on your list, you may think about having a celebration of life event or funeral arrangements or perhaps cremation. And what you do with the ashes after is one of the planning process. I know that a lot of people do. I think nowadays it really just depends on your own preference as to what you want to do, but you should never feel pressure to just do things because other people have done in the past, especially when we talk about ceremonies, for example. Now, culturally, I know that there's a lot of ceremonies that happen. They have to happen culturally, but you should not feel pressured to have to do it one way or another, or to do it right away in general. The grieving process takes time, and it's not something that you have to jump into right away. So, also postponing it, sometimes celebrating anything of life and anything like that does help with the grieving process and with your budget because you don't necessarily need to do that right away. So just be mindful of the wishes of the individuals around you too. If for some reason you're not super clear as to what to do. Like I said, there are plenty of estate plans that actually stipulate as to what's supposed to happen, but just keep in mind costs do add up quickly, especially with the rise of inflation when it comes to making plans to that effect. So I want to segue now into the second part of this. The second part is now that you've done all those things, another part that comes up and really is the bigger chunk of everything, and really where the time and the headache begins, I should say, because it's not easy to do this, is managing and settling the estate. So this can mean a number of things, right? We actually don't know, based on what we're saying right now, we don't know if the assets are at issue or the finances are in order or the properties are in order. But let's just say the first thing is you're trying to manage this estate is the first thing you want to do is collect the paperwork. Obviously, collecting everything that you have is a good idea. And second, you want to gain access to online accounts. So this does require a couple of steps. So depending on what you have at hand, it could be either very easy or it could be not so easy. And so one of the things that we talk about is having this paperwork, like I mentioned, the death certificate, trust documents, terminate, transfer, and death documents. Those are the documents that really matter. And it's because when it comes down to having to do the managing of the asset, everybody wants to see the paperwork. And so having those at your disposal are very important for having access to online bank accounts, especially accounts where you are not named. A lot of times individuals have named, beneficiaries, but other times they haven't. So it's really important to have that at your disposal. The next thing you do when you're managing an estate is you pay the estate expenses. Now, clearly communicating with anyone that's in the will or in the trust, assuming you're in charge or whoever's in charge has to communicate these things, the estate has to be settled before any distributions are made. So what does this mean? This could mean a number of things. I always like to use a credit card company as a good example. Let's say that a credit card company is asking for money to be paid, and let's say that it's kind of hard to explain because I think it depends on the situation. But let's just say there has to be distributions made. Maybe there's a bill that has to be paid that was outstanding, and you can make that payment before you distribute to everybody else. That's usually how it works. Depending on what the trust says, what the estate plan documents say, is what the person in charge would have to do and follow. Now, it's normal to do two distributions, one in the beginning of the year, and then one after the filing of the tax return. Now, there's a lot of taxes, death and taxes, right? They gotta say that's the things that are the most certain. Well, it's true because there is a lot that comes even after someone's passed with the taxes. So you have to file the taxes, and there are sometimes certain things that have to be paid, whether it's to the IRS or to other institutions after those are filed. So there is always a risk as well, depending on the estate, collections and expenses that could be filed against the estate for 1 year after someone has passed. So basically, this can happen, but if you open up a probate estate, that's where you really see the claims come in, because that's when creditors come and ask for to be paid essentially from the estate. So don't be left worrying about the bill, because distributions have already been paid out at this point. So there are sometimes risks in that. And so there are a lot of steps, and it's hard to put this all in one sentence because all of it depends on the situation. But usually speaking, there is distributions that can be made, and according to what your estate plan says is the way that things are handled. But there's a lot to do for people that have passed, and those that are living and outlived the person are the ones usually left to do this. Now, if you have a estate plan, obviously you can name who would be in charge of that, which is always, always good. But remember too, the other thing is that a lawyer's role, for example, is to basically guide you in this and be with you in this, and basically be there for you to try to guide you, but also explain some of the risks and next steps with handling this part of someone's passing. And so I always like to explain that to individuals, because yes, we're attorneys, we help you, but we're also here to kind of guide you so that you're not super frustrated or lost in the process, because we do see this a lot. Now, I want to mention this. We've covered this a couple of times, but I always like to remind my clients that there are a lot of things that we do, but we're certainly here for them and for families during the time that someone passes, and also afterwards, long afterwards. So we usually always make ourselves available if needed to anyone that needs help with these issues. Now, like I said, just a couple things to remember. If you remember anything of what I said, preparing a living will, it's also something that we offer. And the living will usually covers any unexpected scenarios where a physician may be wondering, what are your wishes when it comes to your death being imminent? There's an injury, there's something that was happened that's basically terminal, and the living will basically gives instructions to the physician to sort of explain what it is that you would want to do as far as medication, or perhaps you want to die naturally. That's kind of what this document says, the living will. So I like to make sure people know that. That's still always something that we prepare. Always make sure too that the documents that any attorney prepares, or that we would prepare, especially if you're getting them online, which I always don't really feel too keen on for everybody, but you want to ensure the documents that you have are compliant with Illinois, or actually local state laws. With Illinois is where we're at, but make sure that they're properly notarized too. There's a lot of documents that have rules, and so it's not a one size fits all. Is what I always like to say. We always try to support families with these situations and giving them a guide, and really just kind of giving them the how-to with when it comes to the emergency or tragic accidents. And so getting your estate plan documents in order is always something that we are here to do. So that is one of our roles in all of this. And keep in mind, it's never too late. If you're watching this and you've thought, okay, I've had this documents for a while, haven't looked at them, I'd like to update them, we offer that too. If you've never had anything, we can help you create something. So just something to keep in mind. So I just want to recap really quick. Make sure I'm not saying too much, because some of you are just joining now. So my name is Stephanie Garces Donay. I'm the owner of Garces Law Firm in Palatine, Illinois. We help you prepare for the unexpected. We help you secure your financial future and secure legacy plans for families, individuals, couples, etc. And you can always watch our Facebook page for some of the past Pink Mike Legal Confessions that we've done in the past that kind of explain some of the topics that have come up with our clients, but also some things to educate you. And we always like to use our platform to make sure that those of you that are watching can share this with someone that might be of interest to you, or this might be of interest to. And parents, if you're watching this, consider getting a will in place to name your guardians, all of that. So that's what we do. And today, like I said, we're covering the estate planning checklist. What do you do when someone passes away? Now, when someone passes away, obviously I kind of went through the steps already, but there are a lot of questions that arise from this. So I want to kind of go through some of the questions that are very popular that we get, not just when someone passes, but also just in general during consultations and stuff like that. What happens when you die without a will is a really common question that we get. And the answer to this is it depends on what you're worth at the time of your death, because there are different answers depending on how much you're worth. Usually there's a threshold in our state, Illinois, where if you're worth over 100,000, you could end up in probate if you don't have any estate plan in order, especially when it comes to a trust. Um, if you're worth under 100,000 and you had a will, well, you might be okay in avoiding probate. But let's just say if someone dies without a will in general. Um, like again, depending on what you're worth, it's either one avenue or the next. So let's say, for example, you're worth over 100,000 and you die without a will. Well, it's very likely that a probate estate will have to be open, which is costly and necessary, but it certainly is where your family is headed next. And so that's usually the big thing everyone researches online. What is probate? That sort of thing. So those are things to think about when you're thinking about, should I do this? And, think about how hard you worked. You don't want to end up in probate if you can avoid it, because it's costly, it's stressful, and quite frankly, it's avoidable if you have the right estate plan in order. Um, the other thing is that we get questions about a lot from the audience is, how long does it take to transfer assets after death? Well, again, this really matters as to whether or not you have an estate plan in order. You might have a transfer upon death instrument, which is called a TODI. There's a couple of documents outside of the TODI or the transfer upon death document. I keep referencing a trust that really impact the timing. And so, assuming you have an estate plan in order or you've left assignments to your assets, it should not be very long. It can be actually quite fast. But if you don't have an estate plan in order, then you're looking at a different timeline, because if you, as I suggested earlier, have to go to probate to open up your estate to make sure that the person that should be in charge of your estate is appointed and the court is to supervise anything, that can take a long time. Depending on the state and depending on the county, it can take, at minimum a year. Sometimes it's a little sooner, and sometimes it's a little bit longer. I know sometimes that the counties have required that the estate stays open longer, so it's very unlikely that it'll be fast, but it's definitely something that takes time. So that is a good question, but it really depends on what you have in place. The other question that we get a lot is, if my parent owned a home, are we required to sell it and split the profits? That is a great question, because it depends on the situation. Now, keep in mind, we do a lot of real estate law. And so when I see this question, my first instinct is, well, can they sell it? Is this property one that is able to be sold? Does the parent have an estate plan? So if the parent owns a home, are you required to sell it? Well, I guess there's nothing saying you can require it or you must, but sometimes the circumstances lend themselves to that you have to, because you need the proceeds or because there's no one to care for the home. There are plenty of options too in the event that it's a home you want to keep, which a lot of people do end up doing. You don't necessarily have to sell it. There's plenty of options to keep the home with the family. Perhaps someone else does a refinance and takes over the home if that's a possibility. So you don't have to, but it really depends on the dynamic, because I've seen also where, depending on the situation, the splitting of the proceeds is the most logical thing to do. Perhaps if there is an issue with maybe a court involvement where you have to sell, it's possible. Sometimes the property is underwater and people have to sell for that reason. So this is a very convoluted question, because I would say that you're not required to, but sometimes the circumstances lend themselves in that direction. It could also be that you don't want to do that, and that's where you come see us, because I usually can assess whether or not we can keep the home and what that would look like. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So we're very experienced in doing the both sides of that question, because it's a little bit of estate planning law, but it's also has a lot to do with real estate. Um, so that's important. And I should mention we have a lot of connections with individuals that are in the business of real estate, whether that's realtors and whatnot. So those of you that have worked with our office before may also be watching this, and just know that we do think of our referral partners, and we try to send our clients people that are trusted and understand how to deal with estates as well. So really important that we're getting asked that. The other question we get, and I actually got this question before earlier today, someone asked me, what is the purpose of a trust? Now, a trust, if we're talking about a living trust that's revocable, because there's a lot of different trusts. So without going into the weeds, when people think of a trust, they're probably more likely thinking about the one where you can own your assets in it. And so that's really the purpose of a trust. One of the main things about the trust is that it acts as a basket, in a sense. Everything goes in it. Your property, your assets, it protects it, and it actually names beneficiaries instead of leaving it up to chance, instead of having the laws of the state that you're in kind of say who gets what upon your death. So purpose of the trust is really to own your assets and to protect your assets in the event that you become incapacitated or pass away. The really nice thing about one of the trusts that we offer is that you can actually change it over time. You can add to it. You can avoid probate, which is really common. A lot of people will do it just for that reason. But the purpose is one where it really is for your benefit. It really protects everything that you've worked really hard for, so that there is no disagreement on how things are left. And it does allow for property specifically to be transferred to a beneficiary as opposed to a will. Will doesn't actually do that. It doesn't actually have the power to do that, at least in Illinois. So a purpose of a trust, there's such a big purpose to it, and having it available to be one of your estate planning tools is very powerful. So that's a great question. Another question that we get is, how is working with an attorney different than creating them with an online site? This is always one of my favorite questions, because there are, believe it or not, schools of thought that online is our competitors as attorneys. Is the online world going to replace us? Now, part of it is that a lot of the online stuff is very salesy. It's fill out this form and we'll spit out a will, fill out this form and we'll do this for you. But what they don't tell you is that every state is different. And by the way, the computer, the program, they don't necessarily know some of the implications of putting your paperwork together in a certain way, whether it's not notarized or it doesn't account for something that is really important to you. So they can't anticipate consequences. That really is the difference between working online with an online site and working with a trusted attorney. We also make sure to keep up with the nuances of the law. Laws are constantly changing when it comes to trusts, when it comes to wills, powers of attorney, and we're always looking for the latest update. And so what's online, you don't actually know who's preparing the forms, but you also don't know if the person knows the laws that you're in, or the laws of the state that you're in, I should say. So there's a big difference, and consequences and things to think about, whether it's dealing with minors, or perhaps you have, different, a mixed family, blended families are always my favorite, because those are complicated. Maybe someone has kids from another marriage. Perhaps you have more than one property. And so most times the online sites give you the boilerplate templates, but it's not customized. And so that's really one of the biggest gaps in the things that you're missing if you go online, is you don't actually get a customized plan. And to me, it's like, what's the point? If you're going to do this, get it customized to your needs and your likes. And that's kind of what we offer. That's very different. And human contact, right? Human contact is something that is, I think, underrated a lot when it comes to estate planning work, because there's a lot of stuff that just has to be addressed that a computer can't. So just something to think about. How often should a will be updated? Now, this question is really a good question, and it really depends on your life and what has been changing. Now, most of us, life changes every 3 to 5 years, whether that's your personal life, whether that's you moved away, maybe you're just the same person for the last decade. I don't know. But the point is that we usually say every 3 to 5 years you should be looking at them. Another way to think about this is look at your stuff that you have in place previously that maybe doesn't really account for certain things. Maybe someone has passed away. Maybe you are no longer wanting the people in charge of your estate to be in charge. Maybe you have more grandkids, or you have a new spouse, or a new partner that you want to add. So those are the things that you want to think about. Just maybe life events, anytime something changes, and life changes could be anything. It could be you had a baby, you had a divorce, you got married, you're single, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you've moved to another state and you don't know if what you have is valid there. We have plenty of clients that come to us from different states with their wills. And so we're happy to review those because we want to make sure that what they have is in compliance with what happens here. And so that's really a good time to update your will and take a look at it. It doesn't hurt to look. And the other question we get is, do we offer virtual appointments and in-person consultations? Yes to both. We are actually doing both still to this day. A lot of people love to do the virtual because everyone's working from home. You got your dog on your lap, your cat on the side. Yes, we can talk with an attorney as well via Google Meet or Zoom. And so we do offer that. I've had clients show up in pajamas, and I'm totally fine with that, as long as you're comfortable. We do this in English and in Spanish, so hablamos español, for anyone is wondering, but we do definitely offer both. So just know we are in a hybrid world, and so we are offering both. Now, where do you contact me if you have any questions about what we've discussed? Well, you can always contact me, as you can see at the number below, to text or call us anytime. We do answer for consultations on that number, by the way, in case you're at work or something and you can't call right away. Feel free to just buzz us there and we'll set up a consultation for you. And you can always send emails also to our questions email that you see below. That's a good email because people always send their questions there, which is why that exists. And yeah, it's been really, really great kind of talking with you guys today and covering this topic, even though it's not super lively. It's very something I'm passionate about, and I want to make sure that individuals feel that they're not alone in these dark moments. So as we always say, we always like to say thank you for all the viewers that have been watching us today. I greatly appreciate all the excellent questions that have been presented to us over time, and especially those of you that watch and give me feedback every week. I really, really enjoy that because it's good to know that other people have been learning things by watching our channel. And so that's all we can do, I think, do the best we can. So like I said, when I started this, daily life can be very hectic and things happen, things change. And unfortunately, putting off essential, and I would argue vital legal work that you've probably been putting off for the last decade, like creating an estate plan or a basic will, is something that you don't want to continue to wait on. It is so important to take action because proactively, right, while you are alive and you're well, because if you can take care of your family proactively on a daily basis, you can certainly help them in the long run, which is what we're here for. So that's something I always tell people. And I always invite you here next week to watch our Pink Mike Legal Confessions at the same time in the same place. Please share your recordings with family and friends, anyone that you think would benefit from this. And keep in mind too that fellow parents, guardians, members of the community, if you do have anyone that could use this benefit of knowing a little bit more about this topic or any of the topics we cover, please feel free to reach out or even share the video. So like I always say, thank you for joining us at Pink Mike Legal Confessions, and we'll see you again next week. Take care of yourselves.